Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Orange Zone podcast. We're starting on this shot because we don't have the two shot. It's over at the New York State Fair. It happens. That's the news life. But we are really excited to be here with you. Obviously, things look a little bit different now. You saw, if you watched last week's episode, that Tommy Sladex last week with this team was last week. So it was a really upsetting time for us. But more announcements coming on that soon. What we want you to know is that this is going to be your sports team. Your girls are taking over this department. So we're so excited to be with you for one of really, I think, the most highly anticipated football seasons in well over a decade. So this is it. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple. We are on Spotify. We also have social media going across all platforms. So please go check us out. In this episode, we are getting into our takeaways from training camp. Ashley has really been putting in the work pretty much on the ground at every single camp that they've had. And we'll also be finishing up with some special teams. Hi, everybody. This is Ashley Wenskoski. Rachel Culver is on the producer mic. I'm Samantha Croston. How we doing?
Hello. Yes, bittersweet goodbye for Tommy, who's no longer with us here on the set, but I'm very excited to, do this with you guys and keep it rolling. And what a better time than to, I guess, have a little bit of a transition then into, like you said, a very exciting football season for Syracuse football. I'm excited to get into it. Camp has been fun. We only have about a week and a half left until the opener, which is crazy to say. I'm so excited. August 31st against Ohio. But yeah, I'm not excited for camp to wind down because I really enjoy going to it, but I think everybody at the end of a fall camp is like, let's get this thing rolling.
Like, let's get it on the road. Rachel, yeah. I hear you fumbling back there with something. How are you doing?
I'm just adjusting to, I have, like we said, there's some materials that are normally on our set that are no longer on our set today. I usually have my headphone that has the mic attached. I have, this big giant thing that I'm getting used to. I feel like I'm about to do an ASMR video. So I'm just getting acclimated, if you will.
If she looks sweaty, it's because we just spent 20 minutes fully on the ground vacuuming up all of the confetti.
Our celebration. Boots on the ground.
Okay, Rachel was on the ground. I was standing up. But come on, we both put it in the work. I literally followed her around with the vacuum, if you guys can believe that. I wish that we had the sky cam footage of that. Anyway, we're getting into camp takeaways. Obviously, football's around the corner. And here are 5 with one honorable mention. To start, having a top-tier quarterback like Kyle McCord is a game changer for a team. It's something Syracuse hasn't had in nearly a decade. I'm sure some people would argue maybe more. What makes you say that?
Yeah, so we're going to do our top 5 takeaways from all of camp. More general observations than the X's and O's, but I think everything starts with Kyle McCord this year. That is the mantra. Fran Brown wants to keep some things close to his chest, but every time you ask him a question, who's impressing you, who's the engine of this team, it's Kyle McCord, Kyle McCord, Kyle McCord. We know this. I think we've talked to McCord, and he's a great leader, and we can see that when he's on the field, through this camp, throwing passes to receivers. I think we see his energy really, go throughout the entire offense, really, and has made such a switch in comparison to what we saw last year. But I think where we really saw it on display was, and I don't know how many of our viewers have been able to watch, the all-access ACC network shows, especially that first episode. I haven't had a chance to watch the second one yet, which came out last night, but the first one last week really put on display just how in touch McCord is with these guys. I mean, he's telling Trevor Pena a better way to run his route. He's saying in-depth stuff to finish reps to these guys. I think that's where we saw Kyle McCord's really extensive football knowledge really shine on that, right? Because we're on the sidelines for 20 minutes of practice. We don't get that in-depth. We don't get him mic'd up. We don't get all that stuff. But we saw it there. This is a guy that's smart. He was the starting quarterback at Ohio State last year. He had one loss on his resume, and it was to the national champions. Now, of course, he was throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., and things were a little bit different at a program of a caliber like Ohio State. But I think you just can't understate the ease of this schedule for Syracuse football. I mean, Kyle McCord is going to feel like he went back to, high school ball with these ACC teams. That's not a knock on the ACC. That's just a fact that the teams he was facing last year, caliber-wise, were so competitive. And I think with SU's schedule this year, he has a real opportunity to do something special.
I was going to say, not to mention, and we'll get into this,
yeah,
the schedule for Syracuse this year is also not looking the same as in previous years. And I think it's a really good opportunity for Syracuse football, with all the pieces they do have, to have something really special here. Rachel, what sticks out to you about Kyle?
With Kyle, I think he's a guy that you see, like, people like Arante Gadsden, like, we go through those kind of, even like Ashley was saying, that All Access, that first episode where it was either Arante or LeQuint that was like, I need a quarterback if I'm going to return.
It was
so,
Arante,
like,
yeah.
It was like, it was clear from the bat that this is what this team needed from Fran Brown, and that's what Fran Brown got for this team from the bat. So anything else is like just extra for Syracuse fans. So he is like the crown jewel, I'd say, of what this season could be. So I think expectations will be met for a lot of Syracuse fans, which is a feeling that I think a lot of them have not felt for a very long time.
The crown jewel. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. Not to mention, I feel like the sense that I'm getting even from Syracuse Twitter, Ohio State Twitter, and beyond is that Ohio State lost out on something really good without Kyle McCord. And I think that a lot of people, when he was playing there, the expectations and the standards very high, perhaps underrated him to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into Ohio State's problems right now, but they just named their starting quarterback for this season, and he was the backup at K-State, Kansas State last year. So, listen, will that be an improvement or not over Kyle McCord? That's not my business. All I know is that Kyle McCord is here, and he's been a difference maker. I think to your point, Rachel, obviously this team and this new coaching staff is all Fran Brown-centric, but I think the hype and the expectations are what they are because they have a quarterback like Kyle McCord. I mean, Fran Brown says every day, it's me, I'm the head coach. Sure, you got Jeff Nixon in there, offensive coordinator, but then it's Kyle McCord who's really running this team. And I think his relationship with Fran, you know, from knowing each other from the Philadelphia, Jersey area growing up, has really allowed Fran to put a lot of trust in him and a lot of faith in him because this is a guy that he's known for decades. It's not like he just met Kyle McCord a few months ago.
Yeah, Fran Brown coming here was the catalyst, but Kyle McCord committing here felt like a separate entity.
Yes.
And those two things together is feeling like a yin and yang that can be really special. In the comments, drop it down. What are you most excited to see from Kyle McCord? Is it the passing game? Is it his leadership? Is it something else that sticks out to you? Let's move on to number 2, which is if everyone stays healthy. Big if, always in the beginning of the season. The depth on offense has the potential to be special, and they have an opportunity to flex a lot of versatility. You could look in a lot of different directions, but even going back to last year and some of Garrett Schrader's problems and his injuries and the way that on a week-to-week basis that messed up the whole operation, what a different feeling it would be if the training that they've done and the way that Fran Brown and the strength and everything that's gone into this year could keep those guys healthy for the entire season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we just talked about McCord, but I think SU's offense was anything but versatile last season, right? We saw them at the end of the year really fall apart and have to run a wildcat running situation. They had a quarterback who couldn't throw.
Oh my God.
Del Rio Wilson was hurt. That was nothing short of a disaster.
That felt like a hallucination.
That was a fever dream. Literally a fever dream. We are far past that, folks. We're done with that, okay?
And we're not going back.
We're not going back. We just spoke on McCord. They have a very deep tight end room, one of the deepest in the conference, in my opinion and in national opinion. The running backs room looks great. They have a wealth of receivers that they didn't have last year. I think the word is versatile, like you used. I think Jeff Nixon and Fran Brown at every turn, right? You got a guy like Kyle McCord. He threw for over 3,000 yards last year. They are going to have a passing game that we have not seen in years past. However, they're also going to have a run game, and they're really adamant about that. Whenever you talk to them about it, it's like, look, we got LeQuint Allen. He's one of the top rushers in the ACC. You got Yasin Willis behind him, who's definitely one of the top 3 freshmen in camp that's really impressed. I think I would be shocked if we didn't see a good amount of Yasin Willis on the field this year. And then you got a guy in Will Nixon behind him, the son of Jeff Nixon, Syracuse's offensive coordinator, that joined them from Washington this year. He was a backup on a Washington team last year that went to the national championship, that lost it, of course, to Michigan. But he still brings that caliber of experience. He's a senior, I believe. He's an older guy. So you have some real veterans in that running back room. I put this on here, and I know it sounds crazy, and I hope it doesn't happen. Let's not jinx anything. But if LeQuint Allen were to go down tomorrow, I still feel kind of confident in Yasin Willis and in Will Nixon. And that just really speaks to the depth.
Well, that feels like one of the biggest differences between this year and some of the years past.
Yes.
It did feel like to me over the past few years, when you would plug one hole, another one would open up. Maybe there was a great running game because you had a guy like Sean Tucker, but then there was a difficult time with the passing game, or maybe the passes were flying, but you just couldn't run through the holes. Now it seems like the only asterisk I would put is potentially the offensive line, but I'm still going to put my confidence into them until I have any reason not to. But this year, it actually seems like there's strength and depth and versatility at every position. That's a game changer. Rachel, you got anything on this one?
I'm like still sitting over here trying to figure out my mic. I'm not used to this, guys.
We'll
All
come
right,
back
we'll
to
let
you.
Rachel go. But I just, one more beat on the receivers, too, because that's very important when you have a quarterback like Kyle McCord. Fran Brown has shied away from really naming a 2, 3, 4 on the depth chart in terms of receivers. Between you and I think he's doing that, a little bit to keep his cards close to his chest for
But
other
good,
teams.
he should do that.
Absolutely. Everybody knows Aronde's the guy, receiver 1. Behind Aronde, I really think it's Yazid Haynes. I think that's something they're kind of trying to keep quiet this fall. They're trying to keep the attention off of Yazid Haynes because I think he has the potential to be so explosive. Obviously, the Georgia transfer. Jackson Meeks also in there. But then you've got these returning guys that we've really seen develop that were on Syracuse last season in Umari Hatcher, Daryl Gill Jr. we saw in the spring game, Trevor Pena, of course, Dan Villari will be there as well. But I think Jeff Nixon, in terms of that offensive coordinator role, he came over from the NFL last year. He came from the New York Giants as their running backs coach. And I think with what we've heard from him so far this fall, he has been pleasantly surprised in terms of the amount of depth he has to work with. I mean, Fran joked when we were talking about the tight ends room that they could go 14 personnel if they wanted to. Do I think they're going to do that? No. But it's just a testament to how many weapons on offense and how are they going to use them all.
At the end of the day, it's raw talent. And when you bring up Fran Brown kind of playing some of his cards close to the vest, I don't actually think that's just a good thing as far as opponents and it making it more difficult to scout them. I actually think that's a good thing for the team too, because it keeps everyone on their chest. I always say that, but you want a practice that feels competitive every single day. And if everyone's getting reps and everybody feels like they're one great play away from a chance, or at least some of these guys, it's going to make everybody compete a little harder with one another in a healthy way. The one other thing I'll say on this note, because you talk about staying healthy, I mean, I have even noticed this, I'm telling you, in the Instagram pictures that I'm seeing from these guys posting. Can we all admit that they're all looking huge and strong out here? Hello?
The strength and conditioning staff not only got these guys jacked in the offseason. I mean, LaQuint Allen's 10, 15 pounds bigger. Not only that, but something that I wanted to bring up that I think is further down on here, but we'll talk about it now, is that they've kept this team pretty healthy through fall camp, about as healthy as you could kind of hope for. They've had 2 real season-ending injuries in Braylon Ingraham, the transfer from Alabama. He's out for the year on the O-line. And then you also have Fran Brown just mentioned yesterday that Marcus Washington, who's a safety, is also going to be out for the season. Or, well, he said a few months, but, I mean, a few months is the season. So that's 2 guys. But even those guys are more so, I don't think either of those 2 were going to be first string. So if you get through fall camp, fingers crossed, we have a few days left with 2 major injuries and neither of which were the main characters, I think the strength and conditioning staff is doing something right.
Last year, it felt like there was someone who was going down every single week. And I really don't even blame Dino for that.
Yeah.
I actually sometimes even think something's in the water with like the Syracuse turf, honestly, but that's a whole separate issue for a different day. Yeah. Moving on to number 3, a cohesive coaching staff can truly turn a program on its head. You can go a lot of different directions with this, but from the strength and conditioning to what we've seen on the field, to the coaching, to the way they're immersed in the community, you can be sure, not just from the things you've seen on Twitter, but from the things that we've literally seen with our own eyes and in person and at the training camp, this has been an overhaul.
An absolute overhaul. It's a family feel. We've been talking about it the entire offseason. A lot of, who Brown brought in, he already had connections to in terms of Elijah Robinson from Camden, whatnot. There's a lot of that type of feel in terms of this is a coaching staff that a lot of these guys have known each other. I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me from a media perspective, but also from an everything perspective, is the transparency that this coaching staff is showing is just night and day from what we saw last year under Dino Babers. Now, that's not meant to be a knock on Dino Babers. It's just a fact. We've gotten to talk to every assistant coach, every coordinator. We got to talk to the strength and conditioning staff. We got to talk to the recruiting personnel in the spring. I mean, that is crazy to me. And I think that transparency is really like a critical factor in terms of trying to build a fan base. Transparency is critical with the fans, the alumni, the recruits that you're looking at for next year, with the players themselves. I mean, being a transparent program and not feeling like you have kind of a smoke and mirrors show, which is, I think, sort of what we felt a little bit like in the last few years.
It's okay to say it.
Yeah. Being more transparent and being honest with everyone about what's going on and what you think and how you feel, it gives you the luxury of buying people's trust. There's been so much hype around this team. There's also a world where they come out this year and they don't really exceed those lofty expectations. I mean, if that happens, though, Fran Brown is buying the luxury of being transparent, so he's allowing people to trust in him. I think that even shines through with the players. You have players that are giving interviews saying, you know, we want to go to a national championship, and I really, truly believe, I know that sounds crazy, but they really believe that. Mm-hmm. So just the transparency, I think, around the entire program, you never feel like there's like secrets being kept. You don't feel like there's, you know, I guess like positional battles that aren't being talked about. You just really feel like everything's out in the open and that these guys really know a lot about each other. And that's a valuable thing.
Listen, no one is sitting here saying that there aren't certain things that the team should just have to themselves. At the end of the day, there's also a way where they all build chemistry because they know that they're forming those connections together. But they're doing that too on their own time. And the perfect example of that is the fact that this entire camp, they have all, across all levels, across all positions, been staying in the dorms with one another, building those connections behind closed doors. Everyone doesn't need to know everything that happens. But to your point, when it comes to the fan base, when it comes to getting people invested, which is good for the program, you have to let people know what is going on and give them something to get excited about. And I think Fran Brown right away knew that. I mean, honestly, still, months and months later, I think back to the first press conference he ever had. That was a long press conference. He talked for a long time. He was vulnerable.
Yeah.
He was very open and honest about the things that he's been through, even in his own life. And that's something I like about him. I know we've touched on this in the past, but football can be a toughen up kind of sport, and he's somebody where I feel like he's emotional and he's like proud to be, and that means something to me, that he's just open with the fan base about everything even he's been through in his own life. You also touched on alumni. That's a big thing too. The alumni has bought into this program in a different way, and if you need proof of that, look at James Mungro, who will hopefully be coming back on our set beginning next week. He told us even months ago that he felt like it was a totally different environment, and I think the word he used that stuck out to me was welcomed. He felt welcomed.
Yeah, I think Fran and his entire coaching staff, right, Elijah Robinson, have shown a tendency to be bluntly, brutally honest, even with their stars, even with their own players. I mean, Fran a couple weeks ago got up there and said, yeah, Rondé Gadsden's the guy, but I need him to take it to the next level. I need him to, like, he's your star, and you're still up there being honest about, I need OG to take it to another level. I think he's done a really great job throughout the offseason and getting to know us media and just getting to know the community in terms of giving up what he wants to give, but also giving us some real tidbits into these players. You know, when he was talking about Jakari Williams, the freshman who they really like at quarterback, he said, yeah, Jakari's really good. To be honest, I need him to mature a little bit. Like, he's got problems with his girlfriend off the field. Like, stuff like that sounds like funny and menial, but I think he does a really great job of balancing that honesty, and I just keep saying it, but transparency. And I think the transparency, it just all leaves you with a feeling of you trust in this staff. Even if things don't go perfectly to plan this year, you trust that this coaching staff is the best thing that could be in these players' lives right now, and that they're going to leave this program better than they found it, no matter what that looks like.
No matter what the outcome is on the field. That's important, probably more important than people realize. Number 4, games are won and lost in the trenches. I love that phrase, and I completely believe in that. That is more important now than ever before. We've seen the problems that this offensive line has had in the past. How confident do you feel, based on what you've actually seen and witnessed with your own eyes, that things can be different this year, or will be?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle McCord's only going to be as good as his line, right? That's just the truth for every quarterback, but especially a traditional pocket passer like McCord that doesn't use his legs a ton. Now, that's something McCord said he's working on this offseason. I think we will see him try to run, but he's not going to be a guy like Garrett Schrader that just assesses his options, likes none of them, and runs in for a rushing touchdown.
I would have missed that.
I know, it was fun. I mean, no matter what Schrader did or didn't do, right? That was a fun piece of his game.
That Josh Allen razzle-dazzle.
Razzle-dazzle. McCord's only going to be as good as his line. But I think the line is an area that's much improved from last year. I think when you would look at the O-line last year, you'd be like, I mean, should these front 4 even be kind of starting? And then the second string behind him, you were really like,
it felt dangerous.
whoa, like, this is not good. The size has 100% improved. Demetrius Witherspoon, Big Spoon as they call him, is going to be
That nickname.
Big Spoon.
That nickname.
He's going to be that left tackle, that blindside spot for McCord. Obviously, maybe the most important component of the O-line, you would say. He's a guy who maybe lacks in Power 5 experience. He came from Howard, so that's a different level of play. But this was a story that had been brewing this fall camp. Fran Brown, he came in, told Fran Brown he'd like that left tackle spot, and Fran said, you need to lose 30 pounds. Like, you're huge, and that's great, but I need you to get from 330 to 300 because you need to be more mobile to protect a guy's blind side. He did that. He earned that spot. Also, Savion Washington. Savion Washington is huge. Savion Washington could kill you. Savion Washington is like 6'7", 300, 330.
Like, I'm trying to imagine him next to you, and I'm having a hard time doing
it's
it.
me looking up like, hi.
With the camera? Holy backbreaker.
Yeah.
Interviewing Big Spoon.
Big Spoon, Savion Washington, and you got John Ray Reed coming back. And there's maybe no one on this team. John Ray Reed at center. He started for them last year at center. I love John Ray Reed. He's a great kid, great to talk to. But your original question was how confident do I feel in the O-line?
Sure,
I feel
1 through 10.
10's the best. I'll give him a 7.5 just because I think some of them are maybe lacking that Power 5 experience. Size-wise, I feel good.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he told him you had to lose 30 pounds and the fact that he did it.
Yeah.
Good for you, Big Spoon. 30
Big
pounds
Spoon.
that's a chunk of change right there. And he did it.
He did.
He earned the damn thing. All right. We're moving on to number 5, which is this. The defense, they got some dogs who are going to be playing on Sundays. This is in Ashley's opinion. Marlowe, JB, etc. But she also thinks that the corners are going to surprise a lot of people. Obviously, check out our preview. We already previewed that position group. But there is a lot to see here, perhaps more than some fans are expecting.
Yeah, I think the corner room, I said this last week when we did our preview, is maybe one of the deepest rooms on the team.
You were bold about that, too.
I like the corner room. And
Me
I
too.
also think they've had a ton of pressure put on them, like we talked about, because Fran Brown was a DB's coach. So he is over there every day on their butts, for lack of a better term. The starting 4 is likely going to be Marcellus Barnes, the freshman from Tennessee. Really impressive, really mature. I said earlier, top 3 impressive freshmen this camp, I would say, would be Barnes, Yasin Willis, like I mentioned, and we've seen a bit of Jamie Tremble, who wasn't here in the spring. Anyway, starting 4 for the DBs is likely going to be Barnes. Clarence Lewis, the Notre Dame transfer, comes up constantly when you're asking the receivers who's been the toughest thorn in their side in terms of these inter-squad scrimmages. It's been Clarence Lewis. Devin Grant from Buffalo, and Jaden Bellamy, who returns from last year. Obviously, then you got Justin Barron in there, Cinco, Elijah Clark, and Deuce Chestnut at safety. I think that this defense...
What a unit.
It's a unit. Like, you
Ooh.
look through that, and I'm like, that's like 8 guys that I really feel good about in the corner room.
Yep.
I think Justin Barron and Marlo Wax, obviously the 2 leaders of the defense, they will probably be captains again, have spoken a lot about how Elijah Robinson designed this defensive playbook around their strengths. I think that's also something when we were talking about the coaching staff a few minutes ago. Really impressive. He could have come in here and said, we're running a 4-2-5 and that's all we're going to run. He did say we're going to transition to the 4-2-5 most of the time. But he also said, look, if it lines up and we like the 3-3-5 better, we're going to run the 3-3-5. I really just like that flexibility and that ability to adjust because I think Syracuse has been lacking in the ability to adjust area for a while.
The in-game adjustments.
Yeah.
And I felt like even when they were making them, they weren't always working out well. They weren't always
Yes.
successful. It's one thing to be able to try an in-game adjustment, but it's another thing to be a good in-game adjustment coach, which means the adjustments that you're making are actually working. We'll see what happens once these games get started. In full transparency, from our point of view at this table, we're on a little bit of a time crunch today. We're going to keep it moving on to our last bullet because I do think this is important, which is Syracuse's schedule is one of the easiest in the Power 4. That was something that we believe we saw on On3, but I also just think if you just look with your own eyes, you'll see this schedule looks different than schedules in years past, especially recently. It gives them an opportunity to go somewhere special this year. I don't know if I've spoken with you even off air about how far you think this is. I said maybe like, I don't know, 2-3 months ago that because the college football playoff is expanding, I don't care if anybody thinks I'm crazy. Like, roast me in the comments if you need to. I actually think it's a team that could make it to the college football playoff as soon as this year. I genuinely do. I really mean it. I do think that's possible.
I think it's possible. I think, to be honest, they would have to win the ACC for that to happen. I think if they go 11-1 and lose out in the ACC championship game, do I think they're making the playoff? No. But to be honest, we haven't seen anything on the field this year. We haven't seen the rest of the league. We haven't seen anything. I think they have one of those lightning in a bottle type of opportunities. Now, there has been so much hype locally. You haven't really seen as much national hype for Syracuse. That's something that we'll have to grow and develop, I guess, as the success either comes or doesn't come this season. We know locally we've seen them so hyped up this offseason. I think it depends on what you define as success. Is success only the college football playoff? I think that would be crazy in a head coach's first year. I think
that would be insane.
A New Year's Six Bowl is success. I think 10 wins for the first time since 2018 is a success. I think there's a lot of different markers of success that would be possible here. But I think there's a lot of hype around this team. I think that's a dangerous thing. I think even on the field, what they've pieced together, McCord, a new coaching staff, the receivers coming from Georgia. It has the potential to be dangerous, and it has the potential to be one of those lightning in a bottle years. Now, a question that comes up from a lot of people, well, Fran Brown's never been a head coach before. I heard an interesting comp to that earlier today.
Let's hear it.
And I wanted to bring it up because Fran Brown was kind of known nationally for his recruiting skills, right? He was a DB's coach, and he was known to be great at that. But for his recruiting skills, I mean, he wasn't even a coordinator anywhere. People really didn't know Fran Brown nationally. Some people did if you're really in the weeds with college football. But he wasn't a name until he got this Syracuse job. I heard him be compared to Dan Lanning at Oregon before this because Dan Lanning was a guy who really was known for his recruiting as well. And everybody was like, okay, can he handle a job like Oregon? Obviously, he's turned that program around. Oregon has sky-high expectations this year. I think that's a comp that I think about in my head when I think about Fran Brown taking over the head coach role.
I want to be honest, I never questioned it. I'm really not someone who's a believer in just because they haven't done it before, that means that they can't do it. Everybody needs to start somewhere.
Totally.
Hello, like you need to have one opportunity to show that you can do it. And honestly, I would actually boldly claim that in some ways he's already been successful. I know that you can't quantify it as far as the on-field performance because that hasn't happened yet, but I'm not looking at his success as a numbers-only situation. To me, that's an entire paradigm that includes the way that he's made the fan base feel, the way that he's recruited, what he's turned this program into, how excited people are about it. And then, of course, obviously at some point it's going to come down to the wins and losses. But I like what I've seen so far. Drop it in the comments. What's something that you are the most excited about? We want to hear because we're obviously, I believe at this point it is 12 or 11 days away from the first game. So we're really excited. Really fast, we're just going to hit on some of the special teams players and the coach. I think I'll just run through it. And if you guys have anything to say about any of the names that we've written down, feel free to. First, you have special teams coordinator James Villano, who most recently served as Troy's special teams analyst. And there was very strong special teams play under his guidance the past 3 seasons. They won back-to-back Sun Belt championships at Troy. They went 23-5 over his 2 seasons there. So certainly a resume of success. He has also made stops at Georgia, Mississippi State, North Carolina, among many others. And he wanted a job on Brown's staff so badly that he legitimately unleashed a tsunami of phone calls. Every single person who knew this guy was calling him. Fran Brown was like, at this point, it's actually not even going to be helpful. I am sick of talking about you.
Yeah.
You haven't spoken to him yet, right?
We did speak to him in the spring.
Okay.
The thing with special teams is we don't get to see special teams in the fall.
Okay, understood. As far as some of the players, just so you guys know who you should be keeping your eyes on, punting, we got Jack Stonehouse. And by the way, when I was talking about the whole strength thing, he's someone who I saw on Instagram where I was like, wow.
Ripped.
Ripped, honestly. His previous school was Missouri, and last year he played all 13 games. He had 62 punts, averaging 44.6 yards per punt. He had a good season. He was somebody who impressed, posted the second best season in program history for net punting. He was also 22nd nationally in that category. Kicking, you have Brady Denneberg. He has also appeared in 25 games at Syracuse, including 13 games of the 2023 season. He was their kickoff specialist for the past 2 seasons. And I think there's sort of been varying degrees of success for him. Long snapping, Tom Callahan, transferred to Syracuse ahead of the 2023 season. and he appeared in every game at long snapper. He's somebody who I think is actually going to be sneaky important this year and someone to keep your eyes on. And last but not least, for kick returning, you have Trevor Pena. Anyone on that list sticking out to you? Anything that you think is interesting?
I mean, I feel good about both Stonehouse and Denneberg. I think they did, relatively well last season, and we'll only build on that this year. I think in terms of special teams, all I have to say was, we didn't get to really see them in fall camp, but Fran Brown has made a point to say that that's going to be a real place, whether it's kick returning, whatever it is, that some of these guys who are not first string, who are younger, a Jamie Tremble is going to play on special teams. We've seen that, throughout college football. That's where you get your first little licks of action if you're a freshman, if you're a guy who's trying to crack one of those starting spots. So I think definitely watch out on special teams for some of those names that could be important offensively in years to come. And yeah, that's really all I got on the special teams. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but next week we'll really go through and do our hard predictions for this year. We'll give some numbers. We'll give some things like that. We can even do kind of biggest questions surrounding this team, because I know I have a few that come to mind, biggest questions ahead of week 1.
Yes, we will be teasing ahead to that because, again, we have one more episode before we really get into the weeds and this football season begins. Honestly, when I look at this list, Pena, someone who in 2022, in his sophomore season, he led the ACC in average kickoff return yards. He's somebody who I'm interested in seeing. But honestly, all I'll say to wrap up the special teams unit is, how Brent Axe from Syracuse.com always says free throws matter?
Yeah.
To me, special teams matters.
Yes.
When they are performing poorly, in the past few years that I've been here covering it, you see it. Like, it's one of those things that you almost forget about when everything is going great.
Yeah.
But when something is going wrong, you notice it, and they can be the heroes or the villains of the game. I know that from being a goalie. I'm honestly speaking from experience. It's a position where you're in the spotlight, so I'm excited to see what they've been able to do.
On that note,
go ahead.
Just don't forget about penalties. This team was one of the most penalized teams in college football last year. I think top 10. The year before that, 2022, they were the most penalized team in the Power 5, if not in college football. That is an area that is completely brushed up this year. Of course, I can't say that until we see them play a game. But Fran Brown said they had their second scrimmage over the weekend, inter-squad scrimmage, and there was 2 penalties. So it's an area that they've really tried to improve upon. We saw that focus on in the spring game with the level of discipline, detail, dart, accountability, relentless and tough that this team is making their mantra. I would be shocked if the penalty problem continues.
You knew with the discipline, leading dart. Fran Brown doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to be happy to see a lot of penalties. I feel like you're running some sprints, or we're getting that out of your system real quick. But thank you guys for joining us as always, and thanks for being a part of our new team. We really hope you continue to follow along this season because we have a lot of really exciting things cooking for you. That's Ashley Wenskoski, Rachel Culver on the producer mic. I'm Samantha Croston. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We'll see you next week.